My name is Ryan, and I'm a software developer from Portland. I've always been the kind of guy who prefers things quiet, logic over drama, stability over chaos. I married Megan because she made me feel like I didn't have to chase the world to feel whole. For a while, that seemed enough for both of us. At least I thought it was. We met at a networking mixer in the Pearl District of all places. She wasn't in tech. She was a high school English teacher, but she had this way of making the room feel smaller when she talked. Like it was just the two of us. I fell hard, fast, and I built a life around that feeling, around her. I made space. I made time. I made a home. So when she dropped the bomb that Tuesday night, it felt less like being hit by a train and more like being rearranged by it. We had just finished dinner. Something simple, salmon and broccoli, one of our go-to meals. I remember the smell of lemon still hanging in the kitchen air. Megan got up first, scraped her plate, and walked to the sink. She was wearing one of her oversized sweaters, hair still damp from a shower. Nothing about the moment felt like a setup for betrayal. Then, without turning around, she said it. "I'm going on a date tonight with my boyfriend." No tremble in her voice. No hesitation. She said it like she was announcing she was going to a book club. Like this was an ordinary Tuesday. First, I froze. Literally didn't move. Didn't even process it. I actually thought she meant a friend who was a boy and was being sarcastic for some reason. But then she turned around, crossed her arms, and leaned back against the counter. She wasn't kidding. "What?" was all I managed. "I said I'm going out with my boyfriend," she repeated. More slowly this time, like I had a hearing problem. I figured it was time to be honest. There was no apology, no guilt. Just a kind of manufactured calm, something you'd rehearse if you wanted to seem in control of a disaster you caused. "Megan, are you serious right now?" I asked. My voice cracked on serious. I hated that. She exhaled sharply, like she'd been waiting for me to ask that. "Look, Ryan, I didn't want it to come to this, but I feel like you gave me no other option." And that was when it shifted, from her dropping a confession to her blaming me for it. "I gave you no. What the hell are you talking about?" I said, now standing fully upright, my chest pounding. She started listing things like she'd written them down beforehand. "You're emotionally cold. You don't talk. You bury yourself in your work. You haven't touched me like you mean it in months. You treat marriage like a checklist. I'm not a checkbox." Her voice wasn't angry. It was explanatory. She wasn't fighting. She was educating me. Like this was a TED Talk and not the moment she torched the foundation of our life. I tried to speak, but she cut me off again. "Do you even remember the last time we laughed together? Actually laughed? Or the last time you told me I was beautiful without me fishing for it?" she asked. This marriage has been emotionally over for a long time. My mouth went dry. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might throw up. "So your solution was to sleep with someone else?" I said, staring at her like she was someone I had never seen before. She shrugged. "I didn't plan for it. It just happened. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized how alone I felt with you. I should have yelled. I should have screamed or slammed something or walked out. But all I could do was stand there, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Then came the final twist of the knife. "It's not just about him," she added. "It's about me finally choosing to be happy. You wouldn't do therapy. You wouldn't open up. You shut me out for years. So, what did you expect to happen?" What did I expect? I expected commitment. I expected honesty. I expected the woman who promised in sickness and in health not to redefine those vows when things got uncomfortable. That's what I expected. I said nothing. Couldn't. I just turned around, walked to the living room, and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. She didn't follow me. She didn't say sorry. She didn't cry. After a minute or two, she walked into the hallway and grabbed her coat from the rack. "I won't be out late," she said casually. That's what got me. I won't be out late. Like she was running an errand. Like she wasn't detonating our entire marriage with a smirk and a shrug. The door closed behind her, and I heard the click of her heels fade down the porch steps. I sat there for a long time, long enough that the sun went down and the house went dark around me. No lights, no TV, just silence. I kept running her words on a loop. You gave me no other option. It just happened. I feel like I'm finally choosing happiness. It was like she had already rewritten the story of our marriage in her mind, and somehow I was the villain. She wasn't cheating, she was liberating herself. She wasn't lying, she was correcting a mistake. And I wasn't a husband anymore. I was an obstacle. The worst part? For a second, just a second, I actually wondered if she was right. Had I failed her? Had I been so focused on work, so content in routine, that I stopped seeing her? That thought burned. But it passed. Because no matter how distant things got, I never betrayed her. I never lied. I never gave up. And I sure as hell didn't go out and get a boyfriend. Like this was some open relationship I forgot we signed up for. She made her choice. But instead of owning it, she dressed it up in language about healing and freedom and emotional starvation. She wanted me to thank her for being brave enough to cheat. And somehow, in her mind, she was the victim. I was the prison guard. And her boyfriend? Just a byproduct of unmet needs. The problem is, I remember all the times I tried to meet them. The date nights I planned. The gifts. The back rubs. The patience. The times I stayed up listening even when I was exhausted from a 12-hour sprint at work. The times I let her win an argument just so we didn't go to bed angry. None of that made it into her version of the story. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the wall, while the quiet pressed down on me like gravity. The bedroom door stayed shut, the sheets untouched, and somewhere across town, my wife was out with a man I hadn't even known existed until 2 hours earlier. She came home just after midnight. I heard her heels again, the soft rustle of her coat hitting the hook. She didn't come into the living room, didn't ask if I was okay, just went straight upstairs. I heard the shower turn on, and all I could think was, she's washing off her betrayal before slipping into our bed like nothing's changed. But everything had, and that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with my neck aching and my mouth dry. Megan was already gone. No note, no text, just an empty silence, like the house itself was trying not to wake me. I checked the time, 7:42 a.m. She'd left early. I sat up, and for a few moments, everything felt like a bad dream. But then it all came crashing back. The calm voice, the boyfriend reveal, the blame she carefully wrapped around me like a scarf. It hadn't been a dream. It had been a calculated strike. I walked to the kitchen, made coffee I couldn't taste, and stared out the window while the mug went cold in my hands. I wasn't crying. I hadn't cried, not yet. My body felt too heavy for that, like I was wearing my skin wrong. But something else had started to wake up inside me. Curiosity. Not the good kind. Not the kind that leads you down Wikipedia rabbit holes or late-night philosophy debates. This was suspicion. Sharp, fast-moving, and feral. Megan had said boyfriend like I should have known. Like I just missed some memo everyone else got. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized maybe I had. Or maybe, deep down, I hadn't wanted to see it. That day, I worked from home. Or rather, I opened my laptop and stared at the same line of code for 2 hours without touching the keyboard. My mind kept looping back to the last few months. Things I'd ignored, signs I'd brushed off, changes I'd rationalized. Like how she suddenly started putting her phone face down every time she was near me. How her notifications disappeared, first silenced, then turned off entirely. She used to text openly while we were watching TV or cooking dinner. Now, she'd glance at her screen, lock it and say, just work stuff. Except I'm not an idiot. English teachers don't get flooded with after-hours emergencies. Then there was the new perfume. Subtle, citrusy, with a vanilla edge. Not her usual floral stuff. She said it was a gift from a student's parent, and laughed when I said it smelled like she was trying to impress someone new. Now I'm not laughing. She started working out more. Nothing drastic, just a new routine at the gym she said helped with stress. That wouldn't have been strange on its own. But she started doing it late in the evenings, sometimes right after dinner. One time she came home sweaty but freshly made up, her mascara flawless. I asked her about it. Had to stop at the store on the way back, she said casually. Didn't want to look like a mess. She'd bought toothpaste. Weekends started disappearing. She'd always been close with her college friends. Book clubs, girls' brunches, wine nights, but it started happening more often. And longer. Whole Saturdays and Sundays gone, and if I asked who she was with, I got vague names I'd heard before but hadn't seen in months. Jen and Steph, she'd say. You've met them. Sure, but not recently. Not since this new version of her appeared. And then there was the conversation thing. Or the lack of it. Our talks used to stretch for hours. We used to cook dinner together and chat about anything, her students, weird dreams, my projects at work. That started fading. She got distracted during conversations, giving me one-word answers or polite nods. Her phone always seemed to buzz during dinner, and when I asked what was so important, she'd smile and say, "You wouldn't care. It's just grading stuff." But it wasn't just the conversation, it was the tone. Something had shifted in her eyes. A certain warmth was missing. I caught her zoning out a few times when I was talking, like she was mentally somewhere else. Her hand would drift to her phone instinctively, like it was a lifeline. The int asterisk Macy had changed too. She used to reach for me in bed, curl into my side, tangle her legs with mine. Lately, she'd roll over and sleep with her back to me. If I touched her, she'd flinch, just slightly, but enough to notice. Kisses turned into quick pecks. Her fingers stopped lingering on my chest. The little things vanished. One night, about 2 weeks before her boyfriend revelation, I tried to talk to her about us. I said I felt like something was off, like we weren't us anymore. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I think you're just stressed, Ree. You've been pulling a lot of late nights. I had, but not enough to miss what was going on. The more I reviewed the puzzle pieces in my head, the clearer the picture became. She wasn't just emotionally gone. She'd relocated. Mentally, physically, spiritually. She was living in another life entirely. I opened our shared calendar that afternoon. It was something we used for errands, appointments, and reminders. Megan had recently started marking vague blocks like self-care, quiet time, or lesson planning. There it was. Friday, 7:30 p.m. Dinner meeting. I stared at it. Then I opened her Instagram. Nothing recent, nothing incriminating. Her feed had gone quiet lately, and when I asked why she hadn't posted in weeks, she said, "Social media's exhausting. I just want to be present." But I checked her stories. Nothing. Then I made a burner account, one that wouldn't be linked to me, and looked up a few of her coworkers she'd mentioned in passing. That's how I found him. His name was Jake. He was some kind of youth counselor about my age, maybe a bit younger. Bearded, flannel wearing, big into nature hikes and emotional growth. His Instagram was exactly what you'd expect. Sunset photos, book recommendations, and captions like, "True connection starts with vulnerability." Gag me. But there it was, a photo of him at a bar I recognized downtown. Candlelight, wine glasses, captioned, "Good company, better conversation." Posted late Friday night. I zoomed in on the blurred silhouette across from him. Red sweater. Megan had a red sweater like that. She'd worn it that morning. I stood up from my desk and started pacing. This was real. It wasn't just emotional distance anymore, it was proximity. Real-life betrayal, documented online with a poetic caption and a glass of Pinot Noir. That night, I barely slept again. I just kept building the timeline in my head. How long it had been going on, what she was doing while I sat at home writing Python scripts and making dinner for one. She'd emotionally checked out long ago. What she told me the night before wasn't a confession. It was the end of a cover story. And now I had a face to put with the fragments. Jake. I said his name out loud once, testing it like a wee asterisk p asterisk n. The next morning, I looked him up again. This time on Facebook. Open profile. Mutuals. I clicked through until I found someone I didn't expect to see. His wife. Her name was Natalie. Married 4 years. 2 kids. Golden retriever in the Christmas photo. Suddenly, things got colder. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated. Ongoing. Double lives. A web of secrets woven across two households. I didn't know what to do with that information yet. Not fully. But something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about Megan anymore. This was about the truth. About what I'd seen, what I'd lived, and the person I was becoming in the aftermath. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. And the next move, that would be mine. I didn't tell Megan what I had found. Not yet. For the next few days, I let her believe I was quietly digesting her confession. Maybe even considering the possibility of an open marriage or whatever twisted rebrand of infidelity she'd spun in her head. She moved around the house lighter, like some unspoken weight had lifted. No guilt, no shame, just this strange, artificial peace. But inside, I was wide awake. Every word she said was a clue. Every excuse, every story, every flick of her eyes away from mine. It all became data. And I was done ignoring the pattern. I didn't want theories anymore. I didn't want to speculate. I wanted proof, undeniable, public, irrefutable. So when she mentioned that she'd be out Friday night again, my ears perked. Dinner with some colleagues, she said, not even looking up from her phone. Same place as last time, Riverstone Bistro. That was the same place Jake had posted from. I nodded. Cool. I might be working late anyway. She smiled at that, relieved, maybe, that I wasn't asking follow-ups. Then she kissed my cheek, grabbed her keys and left the room. By then, I had already reached out to Natalie, Jake's wife. I debated for days whether or not to involve her. It felt cruel, dragging another stranger into my personal hell. But after seeing their family photos, their kids, the life she clearly believed in, I couldn't stomach the idea that she was being played like I was. So I sent her a message, calm, respectful, and direct. I told her who I was, who my wife was, and what I had reason to believe was happening between Jake and Megan. I didn't send any accusations, just asked if she'd be willing to talk. She replied that same night. We met in a parking lot near a grocery store of all places. She pulled up in a silver SUV, hair in a messy bun. No makeup, looking exactly like someone who had 2 kids and 100 unanswered questions. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She just sat there in the front seat, hands clenched on the steering wheel as I told her everything I knew. When I finished, she pulled out her phone and showed me a message from Jake the previous weekend. Going over lesson plans with Megan. Might be late. She laughed. Once. Cold and bitter. We both married cowards, she said. That's when I told her my plan, and asked if she'd help. Friday night came fast. Megan left the house wearing that same red sweater from the Instagram post. Lipstick, new earrings, perfume. She checked herself in the hallway mirror like she was getting ready for a second life. I watched her go. Then I got in my car. Riverstone Bistro sat tucked on a corner of the arts district. Dim lights, warm colors. Always just loud enough to hide conversations you didn't want overheard. Perfect for secrets. Perfect for affairs. I didn't go alone. Natalie met me 2 blocks away, got into my passenger seat, and handed me a printed photo of Jake, just in case I needed one more reminder of who he was. You ready? She asked. I wasn't, but I nodded. We walked in separately and asked to be seated near the bar, close to the corner booth if possible. The hostess didn't blink. She led us to a table just 1 row away from theirs. And there they were, Jake and Megan. They were seated across from each other, 2 glasses of wine between them. Laughing, close, comfortable. His hand rested lightly on her wrist as she spoke, and she leaned forward like no one else existed. They didn't see us at first. I couldn't take my eyes off her. This wasn't awkward. This wasn't some first-time affair full of guilt and nerves. This was familiar. This was practiced. She looked more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. When she laughed, it wasn't forced. When she smiled, it reached her eyes. That K asterisk led me. Natalie sat very still. Her face didn't twitch. Her eyes didn't water. She just watched like a woman watching her own life dissolve in real time. They've done this before, she whispered. They've done this a lot. It wasn't until Megan got up, probably to use the restroom, that she finally saw me. We locked eyes. For a second, she froze. Then she looked at Natalie. Then back at me. Panic. Pure, unfiltered panic. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. Really looked. Not at her outfit, not at her face. At her. At the person she had become. At the stranger who now stood in the place of the woman I married. She took a step forward, then hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Jake turned around, confused at first, then saw Natalie. His face went pale. Natalie stood, calm and composed, and walked directly to their table. She placed a single envelope in front of him, one I hadn't known she brought. Jake didn't even open it, just stared at it like it was a bomb. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she said. Her voice was so even it made my chest hurt. "Don't come home." Then she walked out of the restaurant. Megan finally found her voice. "Ryan, this isn't what you think." I stood up slowly, placed a folded napkin on the table, and looked her in the eye. "No more lies, Megan. No more stories. I've seen enough." Her eyes watered. "Can we please talk?" "We are talking." I glanced around. A few nearby diners had gone silent. One waiter stood frozen near the kitchen. "This is what talking looks like now," I added. Jake was still staring down at the table like he could disappear into the wood. I left without another word. Outside, the cold night air slapped me awake. My heart was still racing. My hands were shaking, but I felt clear. Not vindicated. Not even angry. Just clear. Natalie was standing near her SUV, arms crossed. "Thank you," she said softly. "I should be the one thanking you," I replied. "I wouldn't have done it without you." She nodded, eyes distant. We both deserved the truth. And we did. The car ride home was quiet. Not just because the music was off or because I didn't feel like turning on a podcast, but because I didn't need noise. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was honest. And after weeks, maybe months of lies, that was a relief. Megan didn't come home that night. She texted once. "Can we talk when you're ready?" "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. She came back the next morning early. Her hair was pulled back, makeup gone, wearing an old hoodie like she was trying to play the part of someone who still belonged in that house. She found me in the kitchen. "Ryan, please." I looked at her, really looked, and said nothing, because nothing she could say would undo what I'd seen. The lies weren't abstract anymore. They had faces, locations, dates. They had weight, and I had finally stopped carrying it. After the restaurant, after the cold unraveling of everything unspoken, you'd think the story would end with a slammed door or a suitcase on the porch. But real endings rarely come that clean. Instead, they linger, they stall, they try to rewind. Megan didn't cry that morning when she came home. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't try to justify it all with some teary monologue about love or mistakes or timing. She made coffee. She stood in our kitchen, silent, measuring out grounds like we were still two people with a future. She avoided my eyes but moved like she still belonged in the space, like her world hadn't just folded in on itself in front of 24 strangers and a waiter holding a tray of shattered trust. I didn't stop her. I sat at the table, same as always, and watched her pour 2 mugs. One for her, one for me. As if nothing had happened. We didn't talk about Jake. Not that day. That was the first sign that she wasn't ready to face reality. Or maybe it was me who wasn't. Hard to tell when you've spent this long pretending a slow collapse is just a rough patch. Instead, she asked if I had any plans that weekend. I stared at her like she'd asked if I wanted waffles. "You still think we're doing weekends?" I asked. She looked down, fingers tightening around her mug. I thought, maybe we could go to the house in Ashland. Just get away for a bit. No distractions. Clear our heads. I blinked. "You want to take a trip?" "It's not a trip," she said quickly. "It's just a reset. Some time alone. I feel like we've been surrounded by tension, people, noise. Maybe we could talk." "Talk. Or not talk," she added. "Just be somewhere else." It sounded insane, but also weirdly familiar. Megan had always been the fixer. the rescheduler, the master of making broken things look organized. It was one of the things I loved about her once, how she could walk into chaos and straighten the edges without making a scene. But this wasn't laundry or overdue bills. This was betrayal. This was rot. Still, I said yes. Maybe because I needed to see if there was anything left. Maybe because I didn't trust myself to make a decision until I had silence. Or maybe I just needed to see her in a place without escape routes. So we went. The house in Ashland wasn't ours. It belonged to her parents. A quiet little place tucked near a tree line with creaky floors, mismatched lamps, and a fireplace we never learned how to use properly. We'd stayed there for Thanksgiving once, and another time during wildfire season when Portland's air turned to smoke. It had always been a kind of retreat for us. Or a band-aid. This time it felt like a set, like someone had staged the life of a married couple, but forgot to cast actors who still knew how to speak to each other. The drive down was mostly quiet. Megan put on an old playlist, singer-songwriters, mostly the kind of stuff we used to play during road trips when we first dated. She glanced at me every few songs, like she was waiting for me to hum along. I didn't. The silence between us wasn't angry, just weighty, like two people trying to remember how to breathe the same air. Once we arrived, she unpacked automatically, set her shoes by the door, folded her clothes, lit a candle from a drawer like it was still 2020 and we were hiding from the world together. I watched her move around the house with ghost-like precision, doing familiar things with a stranger's rhythm. That night, she cooked pasta. We sat at the table and ate in silence for 10 minutes before she finally spoke. I ended it, she said. I didn't look up. Jake and I, she continued. It's over. I told him not to contact me. I blocked him. I told him I needed to fix this. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said, not because it was okay, but because I didn't know what else to say. I know I messed up, she added, softer now. I know that doesn't cover it, but I need you to know that it wasn't about replacing you. It was about trying to find something I felt like I lost. That landed harder than I expected. Something you lost or something you gave away? I asked. She didn't answer, just stared into her plate like maybe the noodles could form an explanation. That night, we didn't share a bed. She took the guest room. I stayed in the master, staring at the ceiling while the wind pressed against the windows. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't toss and turn either. I just existed, in a shell of what used to be a marriage. Over the next 2 days, we tried. We took a walk in the woods near the cabin. She pointed out trees we used to stop at, made jokes that sounded like distant echoes of the girl I'd fallen for. I answered with half smiles and vague nods. We watched a movie, made breakfast, sat on the porch and drank coffee without saying a word. It was surreal, like we were playing house, but the roof had already caved in. She kept glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was hoping to find something in my face, a hint that I was thawing, that I might reach for her hand, that the damage was reversible. But I didn't reach, because whatever was left in me wasn't love anymore. It wasn't hate either. It was something quieter, something flatter, a kind of numbness that only sets in after the fire's gone out and all that's left is ash. The worst part? She wasn't cruel. She was gentle, almost apologetic in everything she did, like she was walking through a museum of her own failure. But that only made it harder. I would have preferred a fight, anger, screaming, something. But instead, we moved through that house like ghosts. Me in one room, her in another, the air between us too thick to cross. The night before we left, she asked if I'd come sit with her by the fireplace. I don't want to talk, she said. Just sit. I joined her. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, staring into the empty hearth. I could feel the tension in her shoulders, her fingers twitching like she wanted to reach for mine but knew better. After a while, she whispered, "Do you think this can be saved?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Or maybe I did and just couldn't say it out loud yet. The ride home was quieter than the ride there. No music, no forced conversations. Just the hum of tires and the occasional shuffle of her jacket as she turned to look out the window. When we pulled into the driveway, She stayed in the car a moment longer. "Thank you for going," she said. I nodded. She reached for the door handle, then paused. "If we really try, would you consider therapy? Together?" I didn't respond, just got out of the car and went inside. She followed. Inside the house, nothing had changed. Same furniture, same pictures, same shadows on the walls. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Felt like a waiting room, a place where people sat until someone finally said the words they'd been avoiding. And even though I hadn't said them yet, I could feel them rising inside me. Not with rage, not with bitterness, just with truth. And I think deep down she felt it too. The morning after we got back from Ashland, I woke up before Megan. It was still dark outside, the kind of gray-blue early hour when the world feels like it hasn't decided to wake up yet. For once, the house was still. No heater clicking on. No phone vibrating on the nightstand. Just the low hum of silence. And in that silence, something inside me settled. I walked to the kitchen barefoot, each step slow and measured. I made coffee without thinking muscle memory. I wasn't even sure I'd drink it. I just needed to do something with my hands. The decision had already been made, though. Not in the way people imagine it, where you look in the mirror and give yourself a pep talk. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even sad. Not anymore. It just was. Like gravity. I pulled out my laptop and opened the tab I had bookmarked a week ago. An online divorce filing service. I'd researched it during one of the nights Megan was asleep upstairs. Quietly, methodically, like someone looking up how to dismantle a bomb. And that morning I finally completed the form. I filled out every detail with a strange sense of calm. Her full name, the marriage date, grounds for divorce, irreconcilable differences. The phrase felt both clinical and laughably inadequate. It didn't say anything about the lies, the betrayal, the slow erosion of trust. But it would do. Once it was filed, I printed out the paperwork, stapled it neatly, and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I made a second cup of coffee, sat down and waited. I didn't wait for her to wake up. I just waited for the sun to rise. When Megan finally came downstairs, she was wearing one of my hoodies, the navy blue one with the worn sleeves. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and her eyes were still puffy from sleep. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "Morning," she said, her voice soft. I didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward the table. She saw the papers and stopped. There was a shift in her face. Not shock, not exactly, but a slow dawning. Like she knew this moment had been coming, but hoped she'd beat it here. She didn't speak, just stood there, frozen, her hands still on the back of the dining chair. "I filed this morning," I said. The words sounded like they belonged to someone else. Me but older, me but tired. Her lips parted, then closed again. We're not going to talk about it first?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She stepped closer to the table, gently brushing her fingertips across the stack of paper, like it might burn her. "I thought Ashland meant something," she said. "It did," I replied. "It meant goodbye." She sank into the chair across from me, eyes locked on the top page. "So that's it." I stared at her. The same face I'd kissed 1,000 times. The same eyes I once thought I'd grow old with. "You made this decision a long time ago," I said. "I'm just finally catching up." She blinked. Once, twice, still not crying. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "I believe you. I didn't want to hurt you." I gave a small nod. "You just wanted to be happy, even if it broke me." She winced like the words stung. "That's not fair." "No," I said calmly. "It's not, but it's true." We sat there for a long time, her staring at the papers, me staring out the window. At one point, she reached for my hand across the table. Reflexively, my fingers twitched. But I didn't take it. Couldn't. That part of me was gone. She eventually stood, wiped her cheeks, and walked out of the room without another word. I didn't follow. Later that day, I moved into the guest room. I didn't announce it. I didn't pack dramatically. I just grabbed a pillow, a blanket, and a few shirts, and left our bedroom like it was any other Tuesday. She didn't stop me. From that moment on, we became two people coexisting in a house that used to be ours. We passed each other in the hallway like quiet roommates. She cooked dinner once or twice, but I always ate late or said I wasn't hungry. She asked if I wanted to talk. I told her I didn't. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter for 2 more days before she signed them. No protest, no begging, just a pen, quiet click, and silence. I mailed them the next morning on my way to work. Stood in line at the post office behind a woman shipping Christmas gifts and a man arguing about priority mail. When I dropped the envelope in the bin, I felt nothing. Not relief, not grief, just space. That weekend, I started clearing out the garage. Not because I had to, but because I needed the movement, the distraction. I found boxes of old letters, birthday cards, photos from our first trip to the coast. I didn't throw them out. Not yet. I just packed them tighter and taped the box shut. Felt like sealing a chapter. One that ended without punctuation. Megan spent most of her time upstairs. I could hear her pacing sometimes. Hear the soft murmur of her voice on calls. Probably with her sister or maybe a therapist. She was trying. I don't doubt that. But the trying came too late. At night, she'd leave a light on in the living room, like she thought I might sit with her. I never did. One night, maybe a week after the papers were sent in, she knocked on my door. I opened it. She stood there in flannel pajama pants, holding a mug of tea. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "I do," I replied. "Is there anything I can say that would matter?" I shook my head. "It's not about what you say. It's about what you did." She nodded, swallowed hard, and stepped back. "Okay," she said. I still love you, Ryan." I looked at her, at the way her voice cracked, at the faint smudge of eyeliner under her eyes. I didn't doubt she believed that. But love isn't a shield. It's not a reset button. And it doesn't erase betrayal. "I know," I said. "But I don't feel the same anymore." That broke her. I saw it. Her shoulders sagged. Her throat clenched. She opened her mouth, then closed it, like she wanted to scream and apologize and rewind all at once. But I gently closed the door. And that was the last real conversation we had. Days turned into a week. Then 2. The silence stopped being heavy. It just became the background. I found myself walking more, sleeping better. My appetite came back. It wasn't that I was healed. I wasn't even close. But the weight of waiting for her to fix what she broke was gone. The house still smelled like her perfume sometimes. I still caught my eye drifting to her side of the bed. But it didn't hurt. Not anymore. One morning, I came downstairs to find her suitcase by the door. She looked up from the kitchen, where she was making toast. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," she said. "Give you space." I nodded. "Okay." She picked up her bag, paused at the door, and looked at me one last time. "I really did love you." "I know." And then she left. Just like that. No fight. No breakdown. No final kiss. Just the sound of a door closing behind 7 years of a life we built together. And I didn't chase her. Because this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was mine. Weeks after she left, we unexpectedly ended up at the same work dinner. Megan was invited as a +1 to a mutual friend's celebration. I kept it polite, distant. But in the middle of a casual group conversation, she made a joke, laughing as she said, "Well, at least Ryan was financially stable. That's something, right?" Laughter. Just enough to sting. My chest tightened. I stared at her, waiting for even a flicker of regret. There was none. That comment, light to others, hit like a gut punch. It reduced our years together to a paycheck, to being her safety net while she wandered. I didn't make a scene. I simply stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without a word. That moment sealed it. Whatever shred of respect I'd held on to, gone. I realized then that it wasn't just love we'd lost. It was dignity. And that silence I'd come to live in, it was better than her voice ever again. She reached out a few weeks later. Small things, texts, emails, offers to talk. She even left groceries at my door once. But inside me, there was nothing left to respond with. No anger, no sadness, just quiet. Eventually, I packed my things. Not in a rush, not out of spite. I just stopped wanting to be in that space. I didn't leave a note. No explanation. I simply walked out one morning and locked the door behind me. She didn't need a goodbye, because this wasn't about closure. It wasn't about healing her conscience. It was about me choosing peace over pain. And in the end, some departures don't come with dramatic exits or loud goodbyes. Sometimes you just stop showing up for a story that stopped being yours.